The Unbreakable Battalion. The Keldari Grand Admiral Zexur stared at the holographic battle projections with his 4 eyes narrowed in disbelief. His scaled fingers tapped a rhythmic pattern of frustration on the polished obsidian table. "Impossible," he hissed, mandibles clicking in agitation. "No force could have survived that orbital bombardment. Our calculations were precise." Strategic Analyst Visnak approached cautiously, her ceremonial armor glinting under the harsh light of the war room. "The human battalion has not only survived, Admiral, but they've regrouped and established a defensive position in the Talon Mountains. The 42nd Battalion." Again. Zexur's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Show me." The hologram shifted to display a rugged mountain range on the contested border world of Helios 9. Red markers indicated the human positions, spreading through valleys and peaks in what seemed, to the untrained eye, a chaotic pattern. But Zexur was no ordinary military mind. He was considered the finest tactical genius the Keldari Imperium had produced in 7 generations. "There," he pointed with a clawed finger. "Their deployment isn't random. It's adaptive." On the outer rim of human-controlled space, Commander Alex Mercer of the Terran Defense Force knew his 42nd Phoenix Battalion was outnumbered and outgunned. Again, the taste of blood lingered in his mouth as he surveyed the smoking valley below from his position on the ridgeline. The Keldari bombardment had been devastating, yet somehow they had survived. Again. "Casualty report," he requested, voice steady despite the ringing in his ears. Lieutenant Sophia Chen approached, her tactical armor scorched and dented. A medi-patch covered half her face, the smart bandages indicators glowing a reassuring green. 17 confirmed dead, Commander. 43 wounded, 32 still combat effective. Mercer nodded, allowing himself exactly 3 seconds of grief before compartmentalizing it away. "And our equipment status? We've lost 60% of our heavy weapons, but engineering has salvaged components. They're already fabricating replacements using the mountain's mineral deposits and the Keldari debris." A ghost of a smile crossed Chen's face. "Captain Okonkwo says they'll have 2 rail guns operational within 4 hours. The Keldari never collect their dead or damaged equipment," Mercer observed. "They consider it contaminated once it's touched human soil. Their superstition is our salvation." 5 kilometers below the ridgeline, Sergeant Diego Reyes led his squad through the wreckage of a Keldari assault ship. The alien vessel had crashed after their point defense system miraculously intercepted it during the bombardment, though miraculously wasn't quite accurate. The 42nd had been modifying their defense grid after each Keldari attack, adapting to their enemy's tactics with a speed that the rigid Keldari military hierarchy couldn't comprehend. "Look alive, people," Reyes called to his squad. "Standard salvage protocol. Weapons, tech, anything with power signatures. 20 minutes, then we're gone." Private Zhang, the squad's tech specialist, was already interfacing her neural link with an intact Keldari navigation console. "Sergeant, I'm picking up their battle plans. Full tactical deployment." Reyes felt his heart rate spike. "Download everything. That's our golden ticket." Back at the impromptu command center, a reinforced cave system the battalion had discovered and enhanced during previous engagements on Helios 9. Commander Mercer studied the intelligence with growing excitement. "They're deploying in a classic Keldari encirclement pattern," he explained to his gathered officers. "Predictable, methodical, and completely vulnerable to our new strategy." Major Abini Okonkwo, head of engineering, gestured to the holographic terrain map. "The railed guns will be positioned here and here, modified with the superconductors we salvaged from their ships. They'll have triple the range they're expecting. And we've reconfigured our comms to mimic their quantum resonance patterns," added Communications Officer Paddle. "We can broadcast false orders to at least 3 of their forward battalions." Mercer nodded, a plan forming. "They expect us to be huddled in defensive positions, licking our wounds. Instead, we'll be the predators tonight. In orbit above Helios 9, aboard the Keldari flagship Eternal Dominance, Admiral Zexur was growing increasingly concerned. 3 scout vessels had failed to report back. The humans should have been easy to track, desperate, injured prey hiding in the mountains. "Deploy the hunter-killer squadrons," he ordered. Full spectrum scan of the mountain range. His second-in-command, Sub-Admiral Yexlar, hesitated. "Admiral, perhaps we should consider a different approach. The 42nd Battalion has escaped our containment 7 times now. Their commander, this human Mercer, appears to employ tactics outside our strategic doctrine." Zexur's inner eyelids flicked rapidly, a sign of irritation among his species. "Are you suggesting that a single human battalion deserves special consideration? That we should fear them?" "Not fear, Admiral. Respect. Their adaptability is concerning. Every encounter with them costs us more ships, more warriors, and they learn from each engagement." Before Zexur could respond, the tactical officer interrupted. "Admiral, multiple energy signatures detected in the southern valley. Our forward units are under attack." The holographic display erupted with activity as Keldari positions began signaling distress or going silent entirely. In disbelief, Zexur watched as precise strikes eliminated his carefully positioned forces one by one. "Impossible," he whispered again, but with less conviction. On the ground, the Phoenix Battalion moved with practiced precision. They had rehearsed this operation for hours, using the tactical data from Zhang's download to predict exactly where each Keldari unit would be positioned. Sergeant Rice and his squad disabled the Keldari communications relay, ensuring that an entire division would receive no orders or updates. Lieutenant Chen led a strike team that eliminated 3 anti-aircraft positions, opening a corridor that didn't exist in any Keldari tactical manual. And at the heart of the operation, Commander Mercer coordinated everything from a mobile command unit, continuously adjusting the plan as new information came in. The Keldari expected a static, by-the-book response to their overwhelming force. Instead, they faced a constantly evolving battle plan that seemed to anticipate their every move. "They're pulling back to regroup," Chen reported after 2 hours of intense combat. "Their southern flank is completely exposed." Mercer studied the tactical display. "Good. Deploy the modified drones along these ridges. Let's make them think we have 3 times our actual numbers." As dawn broke over Helios 9, Admiral Zexur faced the unthinkable. His ground forces were in disarray, having lost nearly 40% of their strength to an enemy that should have been annihilated in the initial bombardment. The surviving Keldari commanders reported contradictory information. Human forces appearing where they couldn't possibly be, weapons with impossible capabilities, tactics that defied conventional military logic. "Withdraw all forces to high orbit," he finally ordered, mandibles tight against his face in a gesture of extreme displeasure. "We will regroup and analyze their methods before engaging again." Sub-Admiral Yexlar dared to speak. "Admiral, I've been studying the history of this human unit. The 42nd Battalion has survived 17 engagements, where total destruction was calculated at 99.8% probability or higher. They're called the Phoenix Battalion by both humans and our allies, after the mythological creature That. "I know what a phoenix is," Zexur snapped. "Reborn from ashes. How appropriate." He stared at the holographic representation of the mountain range, where the human forces were now consolidating their position, salvaging Keldari equipment, and fortifying new areas. "What makes them different from other human units?" "Adaptability," Yexlar said simply. "While we perfect a strategy over generations, they create new ones in minutes. While we follow our time-tested doctrine, they discard failed tactics without hesitation. Their commander Mercer has been described by his own people as unorthodox. He recruits specialists from various fields, not just military. Engineers, scientists, even artists and philosophers serve in his battalion." Zexur's outer eyelids closed fully, a sign of deep thought among his species. Begin a full analysis of all encounters with the Phoenix Battalion. I want to understand how they think, how they adapt, and prepare a report for the Imperial Strategic Command. They need to know. Know what? Admiral. Zexur stared at the slowly rotating hologram of Helios 9, where a single human battalion had just defeated a Keldari force 10 times its size. They need to know that we have encountered something new in this galaxy, something that all our millennia of military doctrine has not prepared us for. His voice lowered. Something that, perhaps, we should fear. The Phoenix Strategy. The Keldari High Command Chamber fell silent as Admiral Zexur completed his presentation. 23 of the Imperium's most decorated military leaders sat in stunned silence, their scaled faces betraying various degrees of disbelief and concern. Grand Marshal Kexpan, Supreme Commander of all Keldari military forces, finally broke the silence. His ancient voice rasped through the chamber's perfect acoustics. You expect us to believe that a single human battalion has invalidated 3,000 years of Keldari military doctrine. Zexur stood firm. The evidence is irrefutable, Grand Marshal. The Phoenix Battalion has survived and triumphed in 23 engagements where our models predicted certain defeat. They've adapted to and countered tactics that have brought us victory in 1,000 campaigns across the galaxy. He gestured to the holographic display showing Commander Alex Mercer's service record. This human has developed what his people call the Phoenix Strategy. It's unlike anything in our tactical databases. On Helios 9, oblivious to the stir he was causing in the highest echelons of the Keldari Imperium, Commander Mercer was conducting a very unusual training session. The battalion had established a secure base in the mountain range, using salvaged Keldari technology to augment their defenses. But instead of drilling combat maneuvers, Mercer had gathered his officers in a circular formation. Poetry. Major Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. With all due respect, Commander, the Keldari will be back with reinforcements, and you want us to discuss human literature. Mercer smiled. The Phoenix Strategy isn't just about weapons and tactics, Major. It's about thinking in patterns the enemy can't predict. He held up an ancient paper book, a rarity in the digital age. This is Earth poetry from the 21st century. I want each of you to find a verse that resonates with you, and then explain how it might apply to battlefield innovation. Lieutenant Chen, her face now healed except for a thin scar across her cheek, leaned forward. You're training us to think metaphorically. Exactly. Mercer nodded. The Keldari think linearly. They perfect a strategy through iteration. We need to make conceptual leaps they can't anticipate. Later that day, Sergeant Reyes found Mercer at the observation post, watching Keldari ships moving in high orbit. The men are talking, sir, about your unconventional methods. And what are they saying, Sergeant? Reyes hesitated. That you were a professor before you were a soldier. That Central Command thinks you're a loose cannon. That your strategies shouldn't work, but they do. Mercer laughed softly. All true. I taught comparative xenoliterature at the academy before the war. Studied how different species tell stories, how it reflects their thinking patterns. He turned to face the seasoned non-com. The Keldari tell only linear narratives. Beginning, middle, end. No flashbacks, no unreliable narrators, no stream of consciousness. It limits how they conceptualize warfare. In the Keldari High Command Chamber, the debate had grown heated. Sub-Admiral Yexalar, now promoted to full admiral after Zexur's endorsement, was presenting his analysis of the Phoenix Battalion's tactics. They don't just adapt to our strategies, they transform them into weaknesses. Yexalar pointed to battle footage showing human soldiers using salvaged Keldari equipment in ways its designers never intended. They rewrite the rules of engagement with every encounter. A younger general, Mexdor, raised his voice in objection. Then we simply need to overwhelm them with numbers. Deploy the 17th Fleet. Turn their mountain base to ash. Admiral Zexur shook his head. We've tried overwhelming force. The result? He displayed the casualty figures from the previous engagement. We lost 4 ships and nearly 2,000 warriors. They lost 23 humans. Grand Marshal Kexvan's inner eyelids flicked rapidly as he processed this information. There must be a pattern to their adaptability. Something we can counter. That's just it, Grand Marshal, Zexur replied softly. Their pattern is having no pattern. Back on Helios 9, the Phoenix Battalion was preparing for the inevitable return of Keldari forces. But their preparations looked nothing like standard military procedure. Engineers were modifying communication arrays based on musical harmonies. Combat teams were practicing maneuvers inspired by Earth dance choreography. And in a massive cavern, a 3-dimensional model of the battlefield incorporated elements of abstract sculpture. Lieutenant Chen found Commander Mercer examining the strange model. "The new recruits think you've lost your mind," she said with a smile. "Good." Mercer adjusted a tiny figurine representing a Keldari heavy armored unit. "Unpredictability is our greatest weapon. If our own people can't anticipate our actions, neither can the enemy." The attack, when it came 3 days later, was unlike any previous Keldari assault. Instead of their traditional encirclement pattern, they deployed in a scattered formation designed to counter the humans' expected tactics. Grand Marshal Kexvan himself had designed the approach, incorporating randomized elements to match the humans' unpredictability. From his command post, Mercer watched the Keldari deployment with a mixture of respect and anticipation. "They're learning," he told his officers. "They're trying to think like us." Major Okonkwo studied the tactical display. "Should we adjust our plans?" "No need," Mercer smiled. "They're trying to be unpredictable in a predictable way. Execute Phoenix Gambit as planned." What followed would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy as the Battle of Helios Ridge. The Phoenix Battalion appeared to split into dozens of smaller units, each operating independently yet somehow coordinated. They engaged Keldari forces not where the aliens expected resistance, but in seemingly random locations that only revealed their strategic importance hours into the battle. The humans used environmental features in ways that defied conventional tactics, triggering landslides to block certain approaches while opening others, creating false heat signatures to draw enemy fire, broadcasting contradictory communications that left Keldari commanders paralyzed with uncertainty. Most disturbing to the Keldari High Command was how the humans incorporated salvaged Keldari technology into their strategy. Weapons designed for specific purposes were reconfigured for entirely different applications. Defense systems were turned offensive. Communication equipment was repurposed to disrupt Keldari neural interfaces. Admiral Zexur, observing from the flagship, recognized the pattern too late. "They're not fighting a battle," he realized with dawning horror. "They're conducting an experiment. Each engagement tests another aspect of our capabilities, our responses. They're building a complete model of Keldari warfare." By sunset, the Keldari forces were in full retreat. What should have been a straightforward operation to eliminate a troublesome human battalion had turned into another humiliating defeat. Worse, the Phoenix Battalion had captured intact examples of the Imperium's latest weapons technology. In the aftermath, Commander Mercer debriefed his officers in the command center. "They adapted well," he acknowledged, "but they're still thinking within their established parameters." Captain Okonkwo, newly promoted after her innovations proved decisive in the battle, shook her head in amazement. "The Keldari have been waging interstellar war for millennia. How can they be so rigid in their thinking?" "Success breeds complacency," Mercer replied. "They haven't faced an existential threat in generations. They've optimized rather than evolved." Lieutenant Chen was reviewing the battle data. "Sir, I think they'll change strategies completely next time. This defeat will force them to abandon their doctrine." Mercer nodded. "That's what I'm counting on. When they try to reinvent their approach to warfare, they'll be at their most vulnerable." In the Keldari High Command Chamber, the mood was somber. For the first time in living memory, the supreme military leadership of the Imperium faced a force they could not easily defeat. Grand Marshal Kexvan addressed the assembled generals. We have underestimated these humans, particularly this Phoenix Battalion. Their commander Mercer has demonstrated tactical innovation beyond our experience. Admiral Zexur stepped forward. Grand Marshal, I believe we must consider a new approach. The Phoenix Battalion represents a type of adaptive warfare we are ill-equipped to counter. Perhaps diplomatic. Diplomacy. General Mexdor interrupted. With humans? Unthinkable. Kexvan raised a hand for silence. Admiral Zexur has observed this enemy more closely than any of us. Continue, Admiral. The Phoenix Battalion doesn't fight like other human units. They don't even fight like their own military doctrine prescribes. They've created something new, a constantly evolving approach to warfare that treats our superior numbers and technology as resources to be harvested, rather than threats to be feared. Zexur's four eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of profound respect in Keldari culture. In 3,000 years of imperial expansion, we have never encountered an adversary who improves more rapidly than we do. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Grand Marshal Kexvan spoke, his ancient voice barely above a whisper. Then we must do what the Keldari Imperium has never done before. We must learn from an enemy. His inner eyelids closed fully, the gesture of deepest contemplation. Prepare a diplomatic initiative. I wish to meet this Commander Mercer. If his battalion can change our understanding of warfare, perhaps they can change our understanding of humans. 6 months later, Commander Alex Mercer stood in the observation dome of the Keldari diplomatic vessel and lightened discourse, watching the swirling atmospheric patterns of Helios 9 below. Grand Marshal Kexvan joined him, moving with the deliberate grace of his advanced age. Your Phoenix strategy has become required study at the Imperial War College, the Keldari leader remarked. Our youngest officers are particularly fascinated by your integration of art forms into tactical planning. Mercer smiled. Adaptability isn't just about weapons or technology, Grand Marshal. It's about perspective, seeing possibilities where others see only established patterns. The aged Keldari nodded slowly. For 10,000 years, the Keldari have believed ourselves the supreme strategic minds of the galaxy. It took one human battalion, your battalion, to teach us humility. And what will you do with that lesson? Mercer asked quietly. Grand Marshal Kexvan turned all four eyes toward the human commander. That remains to be seen. But know this, Commander Mercer of the Phoenix Battalion. You have changed the galaxy's understanding of warfare. The smartest generals among all spacefaring species now speak your name with a mixture of respect and dread. The ancient alien's mandibles clicked in what Mercer had learned was a gesture of profound sincerity. Whatever comes next between our peoples, you have earned your place in history. As the diplomatic vessel continued its orbit around Helios 9, Mercer thought about his unusual battalion. Engineers and artists, scientists and philosophers, all turned warriors by necessity. They had survived when survival seemed impossible. They had prevailed against overwhelming odds. And perhaps most importantly, they had demonstrated that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or numbers, but the uniquely human ability to reimagine what was possible. The Phoenix strategy wasn't just a military doctrine. It was a testament to the human spirit, adaptive, creative, and ultimately unbreakable.